I got to, kids will never have.
Welcome.
I got to pick her nursing home, so it's all good.
Yes.
Welcome to the City Cedar Falls City Council Committee meetings. This is Committee of the Whole. I'll call it to order and ask for a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer. Here. Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Sayers.
Here.
Dunn. Here. All members present.
Thank you. All right, the Committee of the Whole topic will be the fireworks follow-up, and I believe we have a presentation from the Acting Police Chief, Mark Howard. Here he comes. Thanks, Mark.
Sorry, it's a web.
Okay, thank you. I've included in the packet kind of what I presented here maybe a month ago. I've just added a few things. You know, overall, I think public safety, we feel it was a success as far as the ordinance. You know, the director and I were driving around both during the ordinance time to allow fireworks and nights before, nights after, and we both noticed what we feel was a lot less usage. I can tell you, being the second shift commander last year, I definitely believe there was a lot less usage outside of the now legal window that was created. So I think it was a success as far as that goes. As far as what we saw in the police division, you know, as I gave you these numbers a month ago, but, you know, around 30% decrease in police calls for service. If you take out the officer-generated calls where officers saw fireworks and actually created the call themselves, it's actually around 52% of calls for service that were called in by the public. So definitely a decrease there, which is what our hope was. We also saw success with our vendors and our campaign, a campaign that we spent about $2,300 on, I think worked. Our vendors were very cooperative. They've even called the PD the public safety building several times, asking for more flyers as they were handing them out with each purchase, which is what we requested. We also ran a sting on all the vendors. They all passed. Nobody sold to the minors as we sent people in to buy from them. So as far as that goes, I think it was a success. The portions I highlighted in yellow, we've had 8 calls for service since the 5th. And I kind of put this in there, really 6 of those calls were kind of in that eastern area to where, you know, I can't say if they were in Waterloo, Cedar Falls, but they were all along that corridor, that Cedar Heights, Round Street corridor, somewhere over in that area. But really since July 5th, our last call was the 29th of July. We haven't had one since. I also noticed going through the calls today, most of our fireworks usage was over by 10:30 at night. So as we predicted, we really don't see those late calls except for some of those random 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, probably alcohol-related type calls. Total personnel hours, and we did 104 total personnel hours since June 1st as far as dedicated to fireworks enforcement as we were requested to do so. 35 of those hours were overtime. That was around $1,260. And then we had 8 hours were turned in as comp earned time instead of cash. So really that's the same, just a little bit added on of what I presented a while back. And then we do have some suggestions that Craig, John, and I came up with. Really and it's just suggestions to y'all, really what we'd like to see next year is the same time ending time, all 3 nights. The 11 o'clock on the 4th was just confusing. You know, it just causes people to have to think a little more. But really, if all 3 nights were in it, whatever council decided, 11, 10, whatever it was, we do believe it'd be more successful if all 3 nights had the same ending time each night. We also believe that including some type of language in the ordinance that allows the weekend attached to that to be included. It really seemed difficult on Saturday night, which was not in the window, and that's when most of us are off work, or and wanting to have gatherings, wanting to have family gatherings, and wanting to be able to use fireworks. This year it was actually outside of the window, so it was illegal to use it on the weekend. We would like to see some type of language where council or city administration, somebody can each year add that, depending on where that holiday falls, and adding that weekend in. Just gives more people that are working a little more time to celebrate in use of fireworks legally within the weekend. And then my suggestion, or our suggestion also would be that if the 5th doesn't fall on a weekend, like it didn't this year, we really just don't see much use after the 4th. It drops off just like a cliff. We probably don't need to include that. But those are our suggestions, and I'm open for any questions.
All right. I have a question. I'll start, and then I'll go ahead and allow others to speak and ask questions. With the overtime that you stated, is that overtime just for fireworks, or does that include all of the public safety overtime for that month or that
No,
time period?
that is fireworks only.
Okay.
So what I did, as I did a sign-up sheet, and I would have, I'd check with the fire department, I'd get two on-duty firefighters to work fireworks, plus I wanted 2 people off shift that would come in and sign up. Some nights those didn't get filled, I would fill them with myself, I'd go out, Director Birdie would go out. So any overtime with people who signed up who were off duty to work nothing but fireworks. It was nothing but fireworks enforcement.
Is that something that you found really helpful to have and would want to continue to do next year based off your
I do,
recommendation?
yeah, absolutely, because it relieves shift of those responsibilities, and shift personnel can actually carry on their normal responsibilities than having to respond to that.
Makes sense. All right, thank you. I'll open it up to council for anyone that would like to ask questions or speak.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I guess I'd look at opening up and accommodating for the weekends. I'm trying to figure out a strategic way to do this going forward so that we don't have to revisit ordinance every year. Part of me would like to see something to the effect of, if the 4th falls on or before Tuesday, the preceding weekend is also allowed, or Wednesday and following, something in that regard, so we can encompass one weekend. Personally, I'd be okay with both weekends around the 4th, Friday and Saturday night until 10. I'm on board with the 10 p.m. cutoff for consistency's sake. But short of putting it into the ordinance, could we change the ordinance to say that the public safety director shall set the annual fireworks window or something to that effect? Is that feasible? Do other towns do that?
One of the things we thought about putting in the ordinance was something that each year the city council would set those dates by resolution.
Okay.
So that could be
That'd be
easily
something.
worked, instead of trying to draft an ordinance, trying to figure out for each day of the week.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'd
Councilmember Cruz.
echo much of what Councilman Ganfield said. The 10 p.m. is good. I've heard several complaints about parents putting their kids to bed after 10, interrupting, and 10 seems like a good cutoff to me. And similarly, the weekend before the 4th, I'm not crazy the weekend after because, like they said, it drops off after the 4th. So Friday, Saturday nights before, I'd be up for some generic language in the code with the police director setting.
I would say that I would be okay with much of that. The 10 p.m. thing gets kind of tough at that time because one thing I hear is it doesn't get dark till 10 o'clock. So you have a lot of people, 9:30, 10 o'clock. So, but ultimately, the thing we could do or entertain a motion would be to have staff possibly bring a presentation forward and with recommended changes, if someone wants to go with that. Otherwise, what would your thoughts be, Mr. Gaines? Do you have any on what the best way to proceed forward to tweak things that we want to tweak?
So we know we have a couple of changes that'll happen with regard to some of the state law, and if we hear consensus, or if the council wants to make motions on each separate item, we can bring back to the council a red line version of that for you to consider and vote on.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I am open for the staff's, the open language to be determined by resolution each year. I also, if we're going to, I agree, 10 o'clock, it doesn't get dark usually till about 9:30 of that time of year. So maybe we could compromise and say like 10:30 each night, but maybe, I'm not going to, that's just a suggestion. But I think 10 o'clock, we're opening in a window of, you're only giving them like half hour to shoot off stuff. So I feel like you're going to open the window for violations. But again, I am open to listening to what our public safety staff feels for suggestions on that.
I guess I would, if you don't mind, 10:30 is a really good choice. If you look at past years, 10:30 is the drop-off, really. Even on nights that we considered legal this year, 10:30 is the drop-off. And when you figure fireworks shows usually don't even get started till 10, and then telling people they can't shoot them off after 10. So 10:30 is a great compromise, I believe.
Okay,
And
thank you.
The Waterloo Mayor's fireworks show starts right at 10 as well. So you would hear, you can pretty much hear that all over Yes, sir. Councilmember Schultz.
I'd be in favor of the weekend ahead also, like next week, or excuse me, next year. The 4th is on a Tuesday. I'm also in favor of dropping Wednesday off based on what you're saying, along with the 10:30 stop. So it'd be noon to 10:30 would be the time frame.
Yes, sir.
And be consistent all days.
Yes, sir. I think it would be less confusing for everyone. Yes, sir.
So when we say the weekend, are we saying Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then next week's, or next week, again, next year's schedule, then Tuesday, or are you saying start Friday night, the weekend prior?
Yes, sir.
Friday night, the weekend prior.
Yep.
So would it be starting at noon, or would it be an evening, starting at an evening time, or to stay consistent, stay at noon?
Yeah, I would stay consistent just for everyone's sake. I think, some of the people in what was reported to me, was, oh, I thought it said 11. Oh, I thought we couldn't light them off after 10. Matter of fact, some of the complaints we got called in on the 4th where people are lighting fireworks off and it's after 10 o'clock. Well, technically on the 4th, they had till the 11th.
Yeah, I had that thought ahead of time too, that let's be consistent with the times.
Yep.
So, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Councilmember Cyrus.
I would like to see it just be on the 4th of July, start in the morning and have it till midnight. Just have it one day. Otherwise, maybe the 3rd and the 4th, because it's hard to hold back when you have your fireworks. But 4th of July is the 4th of July, whatever day it falls on. That's our Independence Day. That'd be my opinion.
It was interesting that that you say that. I could get behind that. The interesting thing about this year, though, was that it seemed like the 3rd was a much heavier usage night, correct me if I'm wrong, than the 4th, because the 3rd was on a Sunday, right?
Yes.
And the Monday was, so I think there's lots of options. My thought would be to maybe procedurally make a motion to allow staff to bring forward options and changes that they believe fit to the ordinance, to their committee that they believe appropriate, which I would believe would be public safety in the future.
I think I would make one of two motions. First motion being revise what we know needs to change so that we accommodate the state law on simple misdemeanors. So to send back to staff to draft the language, not until after they hear the second resolution, I suppose, but would anyone second that motion to address the simple misdemeanor for the infraction?
Is there a second?
Sure, yes.
All right, open. Any thoughts on that? All right. We'll take a, go-
My thought would be, is the classification of the infraction still would be according to the ordinance, and the penalty would be the same? The amount and the escalation of the amount would be the same? It would just go from from a simple misdemeanor to?
And Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Mr. Rogers, could you help us out with that?
I would recommend, going back to the wording of our former ordinance that was developed in 2017, makes it a simple misdemeanor with a minimum penalty, and it's not a scheduled fine, so that'd be set by the court.
Any other questions with the motion on the table right now?
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
So we
We're done.
can't do with that, we won't be able to determine the amount. It can't be the 375, 500,000. It's all kind of, that amount is out of our hands.
Yeah, the state statute is pretty clear on what it allows, and it declares that violation is a simple misdemeanor. It does set a floor, but it doesn't, in order to be completely consistent with state law in that regard, I'd recommend we revert to the language we had in our ordinance previously.
Okay.
So we do lose a little control in that.
Is there a guesstimate of how, what is it? Is it more than like a $50 fine or
no,
okay,
If I recall correctly, the minimum is $250.
okay. And then some court costs and stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to be impactful.
It's, yeah. So the state legislature determined that it should be at least that amount, and then it's up to the judge to go higher than that. between us, I would think most judges' first offense would go with the minimum, probably, but there's like $90 in court costs too, so
Okay,
it's not insubstantial.
okay.
Yes, Councilmember DeBoer.
Attorney Rogers, under state code, are we able to reduce the sound, what they're allowed to expel as far as the noise of the different shells?
The state law has a classification of the different types of fireworks, and so I think we have to fit within those categories, and I don't recall that there's a decibel limit on those set forth in state law. It gets tricky enforcement-wise, too, to get a meter and determine the sound levels anyway. So I think I'd recommend anyway we stay with the state law lines of demarcation.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Cedar.
I have a question. You would have to go to court then, though. There's not just a set fine.
Correct.
So-
And you could plead guilty to it ahead of time without going to court and accept, I think our officers would write it at the minimum. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Craig. But it's not a scheduled violation, and so.
Yeah, it would just have a set court date. If people wanted to plead guilty, they could call and arrange that through the clerk of court, but it'd be the same as like open container alcohol, urinating public, disorderly conduct, things like that are all, we just set court dates.
So then you can pay that without going to court?
Yes.
Okay.
You could only, with a plea of guilty.
Now I understand.
Other questions about the motion on the table? Does anybody want the motion read again before we vote? Madam Clerk, do you have it?
I'm understanding that Dustin wants staff to bring forward the changes of the ordinance that we've discussed
Legal changes.
Yeah, pertaining to changing the
pertaining to
municipal
the
fraction.
misdemeanor.
Yep.
All right. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Looks like that passes. Are there any other things we want to talk about?
Don't we need to
Do you have a
also?
second motion?
Second
Yeah.
motion? Yeah.
So staff to bring back recommended changes, and can we put that it be an open window to be discussed as a resolution yearly, as far as the days?
What if we just simplified it to some sort of motion that allowed staff to bring other options
Okay.
forward as well?
Sounds good. That's
to
what
an
I say.
appropriate committee.
That's my motion.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Questions, comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Council members.
With Mr. Sires introducing the idea of the night of the 3rd and the 4th, I tend to lean towards that for the benefit of the staff to hear this, since the 4th is the holiday, and the night before we're off work on the 3rd, those who work on the 3rd, and then you can go right into the 4th and celebrate, as opposed to the weekend before being, on this list of dates, we got Thursday, Fridays, Wednesdays, to separate Friday, Saturday night from the 4th being in the middle of the week. I would lean towards Mr. Sires' dates, 3rd and the 4th.
I think that's good to note, and we could have a couple options there of how to either set dates or set dates by resolution. So does anybody else have anything they'd like to speak about?
Just for clarity.
Yeah, sure.
On the consensus we're gathering here. There is a formal motion, I apologize, but for clarity, I'd want staff to come back with a couple of options that have a conservative approach in one side, and then also a little more along with Chief Howard's recommendation of including that weekend, because that provided many people the opportunity to celebrate and keep out of the pick your day to violate kind of mentality. So I'd like to see that balance. I spoke with a couple people out of the grocery store, and they said they did feel that it was reduced in the outlying incidents this year, and I've heard that that's largely because it encompassed a weekend around the 4th. So just that caveat that we want to make sure that those are options presented to the Public Safety Committee.
Fair.
So if I'm hearing correctly, council would like staff to come back with essentially 3 options, 3rd and 4th only, somehow including previous weekend only, or council sets it by resolution every year.
Yes, that sounds fair. And I would like to throw out there any other recommendations or options that public safety see fit. We wouldn't want to shut those out. So there's a little bit of an open window unless council deems otherwise for that as well. All right. Any other thoughts? All right. This is a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. All right. Anything else, Captain Howard?
Can I just extend an invitation to y'all?
Sure.
We still have 3 sessions left this fall for our active shooter training that Lieutenant O'Neill is doing. It's just an awareness training. It's actually based on run, hide, fight, a way to survive. It's 1 hour. It's very popular, but none of you need to call and reserve a seat or nothing. I'll make sure you have a seat if you show up, and I will email you tomorrow the dates that we have yet this fall, and we're going to do a couple more this spring. Councilman Ganfield was there. I think it was worth his time. It's really good training, and it's just a good awareness, and our whole message is the national slogan of see something, say something. We're just trying to bring that alive here in the Cedar Valley.
Yes, I can't remember when it was, maybe a year or 2 ago. I was partook of that, and it was great. All right, looks like we're going to move over to the Finance and Business Operations Committee. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to make a note that it is on the agenda to make these changes or to discuss and, do I have to do this?
In case you need to hit somebody.
In case you need to.
To make the official change or to vote on the official change tonight. So this has not technically been approved, this Finance and Business Operations Committee. So we'll act as the admin committee for this committee hearing. Just a note. Any concerns about that? Okay. All right, so this discussion or topic tonight is 20 minutes set aside for discussion of downtown public parking structure. And tonight's staff presentation is from City Clerk Jackie Danielson.
Good evening, City Council, Madam Clerk. Tonight, we're going to just kind of start the conversation, potential of a downtown parking structure, and then hopefully gain some direction from council for staff. As we get started here, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background, and if you have any questions throughout this, feel free to interrupt. That's perfectly fine. So just to give a general background, I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but in February 2019, we did a downtown parking study. As you may recall, that was requested that a third party do this and was requested by the downtown merchants. Following the completion of the study, we formed a technical committee between city staff and Community Main Street to discuss all of the various recommendations that were in the study. And then in October, we approved the contract for the new parking management system, and that would have been like the paid kiosks and things like that, software. And then we, all of the recommendations were fully implemented in October of 2020. Unfortunately, that was not real great timing with the pandemic. So, but those recommendations or implementations included adding over 100 new stalls that didn't exist before, paid parking in the lots, improved signage, improved enforcement. It also changed a lot of the time limits on the streets. We gained some time on the side streets. We also allowed overnight parking on the side streets, which we didn't before. So just a lot of different things. And of course, in December, City Council suspended paid parking in the lots. Again, you know, caused pandemic and try to help businesses out. In August of 2021, City Council removed paid parking in the downtown area, but all other recommendations and implementations stayed in place. So that's the way we've been operating since then. So I also just wanted to bring up 2 City Council goals in your goal document. Was to explore all options to building a downtown parking structure in conjunction with a feasibility study and continual reevaluation of paid parking options. So I guess before I go any farther, I believe that we have someone from Community Main Street that's going to speak.
Hello, my name is Lexi, and I am the past chair of Community Main Street. So I am going to just read to you the letter that we provided as well. Dear Mayor, City Council, Administrator, and staff, on behalf of the Community Main Street Board of Directors, I'm submitting a letter of support for the planning and development of a downtown district parking ramp. Over the last 6 months, Community Main Street conducted meetings with stakeholders to discuss the potential for a parking ramp in the downtown district. These conversations have been constructive and centered around preferred location, size, capacity, economic development potential, and parking system. Bulleted below are the consensus points of emphasis from these discussions. A downtown district parking ramp should promote growth and opportunity as an economic development driver through the addition of accessible parking and mixed-use space for the downtown district. Be future-focused through planning and development for the present location and potential additional future locations. Incentivize parking usage in a consistent manner across the downtown district. Be developed with a do-it-right-the-first-time approach to resolve current issues and anticipate near-term future downtown district growth. Example being a half-block minimum for location or location size and ample parking and misuse capacity for current and future growth in the next 5 to 10 years. Though a paid parking system was implemented in 2020, the impact of the pandemic led to a Community Main Street request that the city reconsider implementation of this system in support of downtown district stakeholders as they weathered the resulting challenges of the pandemic. We appreciate the support shown to our downtown community by suspending the paid system. It was appreciated by all during a difficult time. In discussing the potential that a downtown district parking ramp should necessitate a return to a paid parking system in the downtown district, stakeholders communicated that as a ramp would be a physical change, example, you'd essentially see something that you're paying for, it would be key for the paid system to be consistent throughout the district to limit confusion for customers and consumers and property and business owners. As you are all well aware, parking accessibility in the downtown district continues to be a consistent concern, resulting in repetitive circular conversations. While the district's growth and popularity is a good problem, perceptions and concerns about adequate parking deter customers from spending their time and money in the district, which may push them to go elsewhere. The sentiment was reflected in the 2022 Market Study and Strategy Survey conducted in coordination with Main Street, Iowa. For the open-ended question, what is the first thing you would do to improve the Cedar Falls downtown district? Nearly 50% of the answers were parking related. In addition, over the past 10+ years, CMS has included parking related improvements in our capital improvement project recommendations. In 2021, the CMS request was to fully explore the potential of a downtown district parking ramp. The CMS board supports the downtown district parking ramp initiative, but also understands that it involves many moving parts. We're hopeful to be included in constructive dialogue as part of the exploration process as a preferred location, size capacity, economic development potential, and parking system options are evaluated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lexi. So at this point, I have no recommendation. Just a question, where do we go from here? Does City Council wish to pursue a parking structure in the downtown area with the understanding of a total paid system? If City Council elects to move forward with a parking structure, staff will then bring back proposals for financing, location, et cetera, a lot of that would need to be discussed in executive session. So at this point, I would entertain any questions that you would have.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Any questions for City Clerk? Yes, Councilwoman Jabber.
Jackie, back in August of '21, we went to no paid parking. Have there been discussions about returning to paid parking before they start talking about a ramp? Seems like you should go back to having paid parking before you go back to talking about a ramp, because there's no point in building a ramp if there's not paid parking.
I'm not aware of any formal discussions about going back to paid parking, but I I guess I would agree with your philosophy that if they were going to move forward with a parking ramp, I think you would want to implement paid parking, get people used to it before the ramp is actually built.
But the only paid parking currently is for the electric charging on the electric cars. Otherwise, it's all, there's no charge, correct?
Well, and that paid parking for the electric car, that's just for the electric use. The actual parking is free. So they're just paying to get the charge. Otherwise, except for the hill, there's no paid parking unless you're talking about long-term lot permits.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilperson Ganfield.
It's always fun trying to figure out who's who here.
Right.
Just had a couple logistical questions because it happened before I got on. So we had 100 parking spots that were added. That was after the parking study that was done in 2019. Can you explain where those were added?
Sure.
How that enhancement was accomplished?
Well, 69 of them came as a public-private partnership with Viking Pump. They're allowing us to use those 69 spaces after 5 o'clock on the weekdays and then throughout the weekend. The others were turning, I guess you would,
State Street.
Diagonal.
yeah, we added some on State Street, but then we also changed parking on Second Street by City Hall there to diagonal parking, and therefore creating more spaces that way. And we continue when there is opportunity to change it to diagonal to get more spaces in, we do that.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councilman Cruz?
Jackie, can you define or elaborate on the total pay comment there versus partial pay? Are you saying the business owners and the merchants and the retail customers would be paying it, not any part of the city, or what do you mean by total pay?
A total paid system would be if you were to build a ramp and you would charge people to park there, why would they go there if they could park on the street for free?
Mm-hmm.
So there would need to be some type of a logistical kind of review of the area to determine, how far out do you go to charge.
And to drive people potentially into the ramp.
Correct.
Make that a better option, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Or would you also, include in that total pay, a discussion of the wait staff of the retail shops and bars and restaurants that they need to park in there to free up the street parking? Is that considered part of the total pay discussion?
I don't know how we could determine wait staff against someone else.
Well,
but
that's one of the big criticisms. I mean, you got 4,000 spots downtown that are bar restaurant related, and I think the wait staff to man those is like 300, 350 people, and they all come one in a car. So if they grab up the street spots, so.
And that was one of the reasons why we changed enforcement to 8 p.m. in the downtown area, was to hopefully, if you're coming in to work the dinner crowd and you got to be there at 4:30 or whatever, you used to be able to just park right out front if there was a spot and you could stay there all night. Mm-hmm. But now there's enforcement until 8 p.m., so they have to try to find something a little bit further out.
Yes, Councilman Schultz.
I'm not going to presume that every waiter or owner of restaurants in that try to park outside their business. It's open parking. It's free.
Yep.
I mean, it's open to anybody who gets there first, right? And with the limits is certainly a disadvantage to try to stay there for your entire shift. So are we also entertaining in this situation a private-public combination of a ramp where we maybe work with business owners already to have businesses on the main floor, maybe some other structures within the parking ramp?
That's always a possibility. Like I said, we're not going to bring forward any proposals unless we've got some direction to do so. But I'm sure it's always a consideration to do a partnership.
So just to keep on track, so we keep moving through, tonight is just deciding whether we want to pursue a parking structure, and that just means that if we decide we want to pursue that, then staff can come back to us with options for further
So
discussion.
do you need a motion for that?
Yes, but first,
Well, I was
Councilman
actually
Harding,
raising
yes.
my hand to make
Yeah.
a motion.
Oh, I'm so
I
sorry.
was
Yes,
going to
go
make
ahead.
a motion to have staff bring back possible options on moving forward with a future parking ramp and keep it very broad and open so we can see all options.
Is there a second? Okay, motion and second. Yes, Councilwoman
As
DeBur.
part of that referral, could we have the staff also look at including information of returning the paid parking prior to the suspension of 12/9 of 20 as to how the community or Community Main Street feels on that?
Yes.
I would, as an amendment, I would second that.
Okay. Okay, and just a moment here. Can I ask if there's anyone from the public that wants to speak during this portion of tonight's committee meeting? And please leave your name and state your name and address for the record, please.
Wayne Jacobson, 91 River Ridge Road, and my wife and I own a building at 411 Clay Street. So I've been a business owner in downtown Cedar Falls for 37 years, and I've experienced just about all the iterations of parking and understand it's a big challenge. We tend to come up with all different kinds of ways to divide up a finite piece of land, but we still only count about the same parking spots. But we want to add density. Well, as I view density, that means you're going to add more people, you're going to go up. It's still a finite piece of land. I would encourage you to think big, and I'm as conservative as anyone when it comes to expenditures. But I think this is one of those things where if you want to have the expansion of density that you're talking about, you need to pre-build for that. And I would even propose, my son and I were talking about it a couple of months ago, even thinking about 2 ramps at the north of the U.S. Bank location and behind Tony's. You wouldn't have to go as high, but you'd spread out your exposure in those ramps. So I would explore it, at least the thoughts and the ideas behind it. But I'd also encourage another thing. Create some consistency. In 2006, in front of my building, one of the challenges we have, we're on the outer fringes, of the downtown, but we're still downtown. We still pay the additional SMID district tax, and everything that you look at a downtown map goes all the way to Franklin. But we kind of get forgotten out on the western side of that, and we contend with the postal employees. And I came to the council in 2006 and I said, here's a possibility. Maybe we make half of our street controlled and the other half free. And at least you've got some turnover then that could take place on that western part of the street. Well, the council agreed with that, and we had from 8 to 5, 2-hour parking, Monday through Friday, just through the business week. That allowed the residents who lived around in certain apartments where most of them are at work by 10, and even if they get home by 3, they're not going to get ticketed if they park there. But it encouraged not having the postal employees, and no offense to the postal employees, I mean, I need the mail too. But they come in at 7 or 7:30, and they're there till 4:30 or 5, and they never move. So you have uncontrolled streets the further out from downtown, or the kind of the main hub that you have. And so I think there's some outside the box thinking that could take place that could accommodate some of that flow, because the new parking study took that away. So when you removed the metering of the parking spots that were going to be controlled with cost, then you didn't remove what you had already layered on with allowing all these people to park 24/7 in spots that are outside of that area. So I think some consistency is in order with that. And the thought of angling parking on Clay would add a lot of potential spots. You've already got perpendicular parking on Clay around City Hall. So if it's good enough for the city hall, for the people that come in and out of there, well, maybe it's good for up and down that corridor up through 6th Street. Just a thought. But there are a lot of people, I think, who are behind this. They would encourage it. And I would just say, think bigger than what maybe you're thinking. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. And Councilman Cyrus, I'm sorry, is there anybody else from the public who would like to say something on this matter? Okay, Councilman Cyrus, you had a thought.
I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We haven't exactly figured out what we're going to do with the parking on the new development downtown, whether they can use public parking spots to count as some of their parking. I don't think it's fair to build a structure or, believe it or not, make staff double do their work, because they've really come forward with many of these things. And my wife and I were down there twice this last week, and we didn't have any problem finding any place to park. We parked behind the Blue Room and walked all the way up and down the street. But I think, Kelly, I think you said you came down for your anniversary, didn't have any trouble parking. I guess to build a structure, if we're going to do one, it would have to be completely private. I don't like the blending of government and private business. But I don't think now, before we get that other stuff, the other things from planning and zoning, is the time to really try and look into a parking ramp. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Cyrus. And just to add on to that, yeah, I want it to be clear that I'm okay with the discussion, I guess. And yes, I know it's going to take staff work, but I realize that my opinion of not being a parking problem in downtown Cedar Falls is obviously not everybody's opinion. So that's why I'm okay with this referral to staff to have the discussion. Any other thoughts? Yes, Councilman Cyrus.
Cruz.
I'm sorry, Cruz.
Cruz, thank you.
So sorry.
One little thing, the market study by Main Street, Iowa, can we get copies sent to all the council members? That'd be great to see what they said. So when we start talking about public-private TIF money.
Okay, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think I want to stay on track here. So I guess
I'm on track. I'd like to add a component.
Okay, okay.
The discussion of the TIF always comes involved when you look at total pay package. I think we need to look at standardizing the terms of the TIF, whether we do a 5-year, a 3-year, allow any longer than that under extenuating circumstances, and what they would be. But I think that's something that needs to be discussed at some point fairly soon.
Okay, any other discussion on whether does the council wish to pursue a parking structure in downtown Cedar Falls with understanding of total paid parking system? Any other, comments to get to the yes or no on that, the consensus? Yes.
If we vote yes for that, is staff going to assume that we're ready to do a parking ramp? Because obviously it depends on cost and funding and where the different revenues are coming from. Or is it just giving them the opportunity to get that information for us?
I think that's really just given us the opportunity to move forward with that study, or at least bringing back options. I think there's all kinds of different options. I also think that there's a number of decision points that are going to have to be made by the council with regard to the policy of moving forward with this. We're talking about a significant investment, probably $10+ million, and so really there's a number of things that the policymakers are going to have to weigh out before we move forward with that. So.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments before we? Is it going to be a voice vote? Okay. Any other questions or comments before we do this voice vote on this matter? Okay. So with that, I guess all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
All right, so it sounds like 2 nays and 5 ayes. Staff has what they need to carry on? Okay, all right. And now we're going to turn it over to Public Works Committee.
Good evening. Mr. Wiki? We'll talk about safety improvements on 6th and State to 6th and Main. And then just for my information as well, is this informational, or are we making a vote off of the outcome of this? I guess not for Dave, maybe Kevin, or,
It's informational to my best of my knowledge, and we can make motions to recommend to council or staff, but that's how, correct me if I'm wrong.
very good. Okay, Mr. Wiki.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Council. Tonight I have a brief presentation on talking about the 6th Street potential for safety improvements in this corridor right outside here from State to Main. As you may recall, back in February of this year, there was a council referral to look at the safety, potential safety concerns out here on 6th Street, and with particular concerns at the crosswalk here at 6th and State. And other than that, in addition to that, just the corridor itself, some potential safety issues or potential safety improvements that could be made there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so just to kind of give you a background, the existing conditions of the street out there, it's a Portland cement concrete street, has a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, it has a width of 24 feet back to back, length of approximately 315 feet. It's traffic signal controlled at Main Street, and it's a stop sign controlled at State Street. Next slide. So we looked at the crash data in the corridor from State to Main, and what we found was that in the last 10 years, there was only 2 crashes that were reported. And of those reported crashes, there was no injuries that were reported. And in addition to that, there was no other safety concerns that were reported in the corridor. So just to give you an idea of the history there, very little in terms of crash datas. Okay, then we took a look at the intersection here at State Street, and there are some potential improvements that could be made there. One of them was to improve some of the striping within the crosswalk and add that piano bar type paint pattern to increase visibility. In addition to that, we can add increase the stop sign size, make it an oversized stop sign. Standard stop sign size is 30 by 30. An oversized one would be 36 by 36. We could add additional signage to warn motorists of the crosswalk. And we could also increase or add additional paint within the sidewalk itself just to make it more visible to pedestrians, letting them know that they're coming up on a crosswalk. So just to basically summarize all this, in the last 10 years, there's only 2 accidents that were reported in the corridor. There is no other safety concerns reported in the corridor. We did take a look at the parking out here, the 90-degree parking, and evaluated whether it would make sense to have angled parking there. We'd end up losing out on about 3 parking spaces if we did that. And then the advanced or the enhanced safety features that we could implement at the crosswalk at State Street, we could add those. Then that's really my presentation. Any questions?
Mr. Wiki, could you go back to the shot, the overhead shot of the street?
Yeah, I think that was the second slide, Marcy.
Is there a minimum width required for a city street?
Well, for new streets and new subdivisions, we have that's written in the subdivision code for a 31-foot street. But for existing streets, I'm not sure what the exact minimum would be.
So the area in that, back to that picture, if you would, please, where the parking starts Yeah, that's it there. So you have the 90-degree parking, that if we start at State and 6th, you have 90-degree parking up to that little green median there. That's where the street narrows, and that's close to inside the street, about 15 and a half feet.
There is a pinch point where that pavement jogs over a little bit.
And that
yes.
was one of the points of concern. But there is, are you aware, I'm not aware of what the minimum width is, or are we?
I'm not sure if other than just, industry standards, we have minimum widths that we design by. But I don't know if we have anything stated.
So
in
going from
code.
24 to 15, we're 9-foot difference in that pinch point. Any recommendation of why that was done that way? Is there a property infringement going to the south here, or?
No, I mean, anything that I looked into doesn't give me any justification on why exactly they made that jog like that. It was done at some point in time. I'm not sure what the consideration was, other than to, potentially add that additional parking.
It seems more to the south where, again, if you go back to the picture, it seems more to the south than it does to the north of where the pinch point is, because we're really landlocked with those parking spots. But and it's in that picture, it's difficult to see that's a shadow, so that the actual street is the brown where it makes the jaunt. So that was one of the areas of concern along with the intersections. But do you know where those accidents were? Were they at the intersections, or were they at where people were pulling in the park, or what the situation was?
So both accidents were at the entrances into the library parking lot here.
Okay. All right, open it up for questions, or
I have a question.
Councilman Burr?
Is the safety concern for vehicle traffic on State Street, or is it for pedestrians and bicyclists on the sidewalk?
I think the concern that was brought up during the referral was the pedestrians in the crosswalk.
Okay, because I'm sorry, you mentioned signage warning motorists of crosswalk. Is there any standard signage warning bicyclists of crosswalk or of intersection?
So it would be the same signage.
It's the same.
Councilman Schultz? So technically, and I say this because it's the thing that drives me nuts as a bicyclist, bicyclists should not be riding their bikes on the sidewalk, correct? Isn't that against our city ordinance or whatever? Isn't there?
Mr. Rogers?
Okay.
Just downtown and on College Hill.
Okay, so at this intersection, can a bicyclist ride on the, I mean, is this technically downtown?
From 1st to 6th on Main Street, and then on the College Hill, bicycles are prohibited on the sidewalk.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, when we brought this up, like, I was okay with this discussion because as, I don't know if it matters, but as a parent, like, I've thought about this intersection. So I appreciate the work that's been done. I appreciate you taking the time to tell us what exactly has been gone on. The enhanced signage and things that have been mentioned, do you need any direction from us to be able to, because that's what, are you saying that could be done to maybe add increased visibility to this intersection out here?
Right, those are safety features that we could implement. So
Sure. And do you need direction from us to do that, or could that just be done on a staff level?
I think we can do that administratively, honestly.
Okay. I guess my point is thank you for your for the work that's been done, and I would feel comfortable or better, I guess, about this intersection with any, because you do kind of have to pay attention, right? Like, it's all of a sudden you're coming out from behind the old, what was a grocery store, and if you're daydreaming or whatever, I appreciate lots of things to draw attention as a pedestrian often. So I hope we do that.
Okay, anyone else? Councilman Cruz?
Thank you. The point that was brought to my attention, and one of the reasons I made this referral initially, was the eastbound traffic having to go so far out to see around the bank, former grocery store, your vehicle's already crossing the crosswalk to see what's coming from the south, the northbound traffic. I don't know how, I mean, signage will slow down the traffic exiting out onto State Street, but I don't know, some places you see these mirrors to see what's coming around the corner. I mean, I don't know that we got any in the city that I can think of, but that's one of the spots. Similar to what Kelly's saying, you got to get out there before you see around the bank. And you're already on top of the sidewalk.
I appreciate that comment because I do that, but I feel like what the point is that I'm taking from this is it's maybe a perceived problem, but it sounds like most people understand that it's a dangerous intersection. So be it a pedestrian or a motorist, everybody's kind of creeping forward. The other thing is what would you do? I mean, you've got a giant structure. I mean, what would be done? Are we going to narrow the road? Or, I mean, I just am not sure where further discussion goes. It sounds like there's really not a problem. That data shows that it's not a problem. Staff is aware of our concern or the public's concern. Sounds like there can be more things to be done for increased visibility. I just don't know what can be done beyond that because you're not going to probably tear down the structure, I guess. So.
I think one of the suggestions at one point was to go with a one-way from State to Main so that people would not be going down that street. That was just a point of discussion, not a suggestion, it's just what was discussed. So that would eliminate that need to have that hazard. And again, the data, however, shows, to Councilman Dunn's point, the data doesn't show that we've had the experiences there. People have that. When I go on that street, I actually end up in more concern with the southbound traffic because I'm edging out there and all of a sudden here comes someone from the north and I'm getting into the lane trying to see around the other way. So again, we've got pedestrian concerns and motor vehicle concerns. I don't know how we can solve that motor vehicle concern of edging out there. The mirror, I've seen those mirrors.
Yeah, I was wondering, do we incorporate mirrors anywhere in the city? Or is that something our engineering department doesn't want to mess with?
I'm not aware of any mirrors that are anywhere placed in the city at all.
I don't know that I've ever seen that practice on a city street. You see that practice in drive-throughs and some of those scenarios, but I don't know how you would incorporate that on a city street.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
You know, the other thing that could happen is if you look at that overhead as well on 6th Street, if you got rid of the 10 parking stalls there, you could straighten that out, which would pull the vehicles away from the building again, but that would require us to eliminate 10 parking stalls in there. And I think to Mr. Wiggy's point is we're not seeing the safety concerns that are in that area.
Mr. Ganfield?
Yeah, I just think I would reiterate one of the initial concerns that was brought forward made this interesting to see from a feasibility standpoint whether we would gain more parking by vacating that street. That's simply not justifiable at this point. The safety concern doesn't seem to justify a whole lot of movement to the street. So I would be in line with what you're asking to do for some safety improvements, knowing that you don't need our say-so to do it. I would give one cautionary about the increased stop sign becoming a vision impairment. So being in favor of all of these adjustments except for a larger stop sign, they already know to stop. It's the traffic coming in that's caused the accidents in the past. To that end, could we put a traffic turning sign on both sides of that intersection on State Street? So that as traffic is approaching, there's a sign reminding them that some people are turning off of 6th. In addition to that, there was a friend of mine who lives out in Dunstable, Mass. They do have mirrors at low visibility intersections within their city streets. So as you approach, you've got a concave mirror so you can see blind spots on either side. That might be something to look into if it pleases the staff. But I guess I would move to support their decisions to add these safety enhancements.
Mr. Wiki, if there was a motion to add a mirror, would we have a location to do that?
I would have to look into that further. I'm not sure the best place where we might be able to put one at this, just off the top of my head. I'd have to really look at that and see if it's feasible, honestly.
I mean, would we have to put up, possibly, could we put up a post with an overhead arm with the, facing down the south side?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Wiki or any other comments? Okay, so do we need a motion to ask the procedures of increasing stripage, increasing signage, and increasing sidewalk markings for pedestrians?
I don't think they need any direction from us, right? This was just purely informational. Are you needing any direction from?
I don't have a recommendation
Right.
for any kind of motion. This is just informational presentation.
Sure.
So if we don't,
If we'd like
we
to
just
see
gonna
it
sit on
done,
this then, or?
if we'd like to see it done, we can make a motion that they execute those signage improvements.
But I don't think you need that, do you? You just, I think we don't need anything, right? Which was just informational, right?
Right.
Okay.
Procedurally speaking, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have the discretion to do this or not do this.
Sure.
If we make a motion, then they have to do this.
Sure. Okay.
So,
That's what our-
or that's the way I would view it. The motion would be a direction to do this. So therefore, I don't know, I guess we could ask for clarity. Was this something that you guys were intending to do, or were you just giving us the option to make the motion to say yes or no, just for clarity's sake?
Well, we were giving you the information to show you that that is one of the safety improvements that we could do.
Could do. So I think it would be safe to say a motion would be,
It will be the intent of Public Works to do these improvements.
okay, it will
Not
be.
only what you see here, but we'll also make sure that the ADA requirements are met for
Okay.
the sidewalks. And we'll put advanced signage coming from the south northbound on that
Okay.
sidewalk.
Well, that clears it up then. No motion needed.
So with that, I would agree with Councilman Ganfield that if the larger stop sign would create even yet more of a visual impairment, that I can almost see that out the window here, but you use your judgment, Mr. Heath.
We'll have our traffic operations staff analyze that and make sure that they use the proper signage, proper sized signage. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wiki.
All right, thank you.
And with that ends and moves on.
All right. So we have before we go on to Community Development Committee, we'll do a point of clarity. We have amended and approved policy, but we're in the middle of the ordinance change for the committees, yet the mayor has done new appointments. So technically, by law, or you could argue that I should run the Community Development Committee, but since we're in the middle of that, I'll leave it up to council's discretion as to if that's okay, or if they would like to wait for the ordinance change.
I think we're okay to proceed.
okay.
Yeah.
Either way to me, it doesn't matter. Just wanted to make sure that council was okay with it. All right, so we'll move on to Community Development Committee then. And we have a presentation from Ms. Karen Howard on the clarification of private shared parking requirements referral to Planning and Zoning Commission.
Good evening. I don't really, wasn't intending to give this presentation again.
Okay.
I think you heard it before, you saw it before. I did include it in your packet, so you had a chance to kind of review that and go over it. I think this meeting was for you to clarify to the Planning and Zoning Commission what your referral specifically was going to be. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'll open it up to council to go ahead and start in on this.
Mr. Harding?
Yes, sir, Councilmember Ganfield.
So I think one of the things that we wanted to clarify was just exactly what we are asking from planning and zoning. There was a bit of ambiguity after our last meeting, so I guess I'd like to find out what we want to send to them by actual motions from this committee. So if we're asking them to reduce a certain number, we need to set that number to them. I've thought a lot about whether or not this sending planning and zoning what we want is a bad move. When we compare that with sending a request for consultancy, if we tell the consultant what we're asking for, that's a bad move. We don't want to get somebody's opinion just to match up with what we'd like. But we're trying to give P&Z some direction so that we can actually move forward with this and be done with it. So I guess what I was hoping we'd get out of this, again, meeting was exactly what we're asking Planning and Zoning's expert opinion on. I think what I continue to look at with our shared parking requirements, if we've got already existent public parking on the street, whether it's connected to the parcel or not, and we're allowing that to be called shared parking, it wasn't adding any new parking for commercial employees or visitors to the downtown. So that's my big sticking point. I'd like to hear from other council persons just exactly what they want to have done so that we can come to a good compromise to send to P&Z and put this to bed.
Fair enough. Yes, Councilmember
Yes.
Dunn.
This might be able to, hopefully, I'm just going to put this out there, and this is coming from a person who's been a very big proponent of the shared parking. But in interest of moving on, I would make the motion to scratch everything that's going on right now with the downtown zoning / parking, including the shared parking, and refer back to the Community Development Committee that there be no shared parking. So just to move on past this thing that's dominated us for 2 years and have some compromise, and to move on to the other parts of our city that need our attention, I would make that motion to scratch shared parking altogether.
Second that.
Do you mean mandatory shared parking?
Oh, yeah.
Voluntary?
Yes, mandatory shared parking. If there is private-public agreements such as what we already have in place, I do not intend to take that away. But yes, mandatory shared parking.
Point of clarification on your motion, would we be sending that back to P&Z to see if they would send it to us rather than send it to the Community Development Committee? Is that what you meant, or would you want to send it to, because I think it's my understanding that we would send that recommendation back to P&Z.
Sure.
And if they were behind it, they would send it to council, and then we could approve it.
Absolutely. I would love to have their input
All
on
right,
this
so
matter.
friendly. So let's open up that on the table. Anybody? Yes, go ahead, council. We'll start with Councilmember Cruz.
So having attended the discussion that Planning and Zoning went through to come up with the .75, part of the discussion was to maintain the shared parking for a total of 1 spot per bedroom. So if we take away the shared parking discussion, we then would take the .75 to 1 spot per bedroom is what we would do. So I would be in favor of doing that. And then the building owner can decide if there are any extra spots, they could be given and designated to the retail shop owners, managers, that sort of thing. So you would end up with a pseudo shared parking, but it's not formalized. But I distinctly saw the P&Z agree to 1 total parking spot with .75 on site and shared 25. So
That makes sense. That's a good point. Councilmember DeBur, I saw you.
That was basically my point, that if we change the no mandatory on shared parking, it also changes the number of required parking spots, because they had done their formula using shared.
Okay, so we could make an amendment to the motion to
Just have it also include.
have it include changing from .75 to 1 to account for that .25 of the shared space. Would there be?
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Second.
Second. All right. Do we have any talking points on including that?
Would you clarify that you mean residential parking requirement?
Correct.
Yes, correct. Residential pertaining to the new zoning ordinances.
That was the only place where shared parking was required, was residential.
Just wanted to make sure we all knew we were talking about residential.
Yeah. All right.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
There is upper floor
Councilmember.
commercial does have some required parking, but regardless, it would be in residential. I think this is a great compromise to get rid of the complexity of the city trying to mandate or work on all the times. It still leaves voluntary shared parking for private enterprise to work out that might really still be a solution. So I'm all in favor of that compromise to move to 1 spot in lieu of removing shared parking.
All right, so right now on the table is just voting on the amendment to what we were sending back. So are we ready to vote on the amendment? All right, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so the amendment passes. Now we're back to the original motion, which is to send back to P&Z the, do you have it written down? Can you help me out? Thanks.
Refer back to P&Z that there will be no residential shared parking.
And also the amendment of changing it to
0.75 to 1.
to 1. Yep, okay.
And
Yes.
to make sure it's mandatory shared parking, right? Do we want that in there?
Yeah. to
You
make
can
sure-
still share all the parking if you
still
wish.
voluntary, yes. It
Yeah.
could still be voluntary. It would just be mandatory.
And wouldn't that also be for commercial as well? Shared parking is shared parking. So it would be all shared parking?
It was never.
Could you clarify, Councilmember Sires, what you mean?
Yeah, any building down there that went on was going to have shared parking. And then they've just brought up that it's residential. So it would be all shared parking, whether residential or commercial. That's the way I would understand it.
Correction or point of information?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Cruz.
The second page of this information kind of highlights the minimum shared requirement. It said the residential in mixed-use or multi-use buildings had the 0.25. The upper story commercial, if you want to put that slide on, I think page 20 is what I have, but right there. Minimum shared parking, upper story commercial, 1.25. So, Mr. Sires, are you saying that 1.25 there is considered the shared requirement for the commercial?
I believe so, but you'd have to check with staff.
Yes, that's correct.
There's nothing else shared then? The only thing that was ever going to be shared was residential?
No, what's on the screen, the 1.25 spaces per, for the 1,000 square feet is the commercial, upper floor, commercial shared parking.
Right, and I'd like to see that wiped out too, all shared parking. Not just residential, but all of it. If you're going to get rid of it for residential, it has to be all of it. Because
What I was
I
asking
believe
to
that's what the
clar-
motion was.
I was looking to clarify on residential parking requirement when you talked about the 0.75 as a residential parking requirement. You were talking about if you eliminated shared, then I believe council was asking for residential to go to 1.
Yes, not.
Yeah.
Right, but
Just so that didn't get confused between the residential ratio versus the commercial ratio.
right, and
That's
we
all.
weren't changing the commercial ratio. All we were saying was is they'd no longer have to share either. It's got to be all of them don't have to share, because then pretty soon you're into the which hours do you share, on and on. What a nightmare. So I would say had to be all shared parking would go away.
Correct, and what then the conversation moved, okay, so if shared parking goes away, then the residential parking requirement should increase to 1.
Exactly, but all I'm trying to clarify is that it's residential and commercial shared parking goes away.
Yes.
And we just upgrade. Okay, that's all I was clarifying.
Right.
Good point, Dave.
Shared is shared. All right, so we have the motion on the table. It's been amended. The amendment was approved. We are now back to the original motion plus the amendment. Is there any other questions before or conversation before we feel comfortable moving forward with this? I think I can say that I feel comfortable if we can compromise on this. I'll support it because I think I'd like to move forward and continue. So,
Could Madam Clerk read that again?
sure, one more time, no problem.
Refer to P&Z that there will be no residential mandatory shared parking, with the amendment included 0.75 to 1.
And where's the commercial part come into that?
So I think the motion should strike the word residential in front of shared parking and just say shared parking, and then put the word residential in front of the 0.75 to 1, correct? That the word residential was just kind of put in the wrong spot. I get the confusion. So the shared parking, to clarify for everyone, is just shared in general.
For
The only thing,
urban general, maybe? Should we put that in there?
should we specify, Stephanie, or just, no, just leave it broad? And then The only thing pertaining to residential that we're sending back is changing from 0.75 to 1. So, everybody comfortable?
And I
Yes.
just want to make sure, because did it say mandatory? We're just talking about
Yes,
mandatory.
we did. Just
Everybody else good?
mandatory.
Okay, good.
Still be able to work out an agreement with the city.
Okay.
All right.
Can we read it again then, one last time before?
Refer to the P and Z that there will be no mandatory shared parking, and residential will be 0.75 to 1.
Move it from, okay.
Change from 0.75.
All right. Any other comments or questions before we go on? All right. Well, this requires a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Well, it seems like we're making some progress. And with that, that was the only thing on the Community Development Committee. So I will go ahead and adjourn this until the council meeting at 7. We are adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.
This